Welcome to Turner Farm and welcome to my absolute favorite time of year to bake sourdough and gift it to our friends and family. There are so many beautiful ways to gift sourdough, and today I'm going to show you some of my favorites. Plus, I'm going to give you a brand new recipe to try out for yourself this holiday season. Thanks so much for liking and subscribing to our channel this year, and Merry Christmas. So one of my favorite things to do at Christmas time is gift my sourdough, and I have so many different ways of doing that I absolutely love. And so today I'm going to teach you 3 different ways to gift sourdough at Christmas time, and these are my absolute favorite 3 ways. So I love gifting just regular old sourdough as well, but today I'm going to show you how I gift beautiful scored designs in my chocolate sourdough. I'm going to share all these recipes with you. My chocolate sourdough. And then I love doing a cinnamon star, so I'm going to show that one. And then also a chocolate candy cane, a chocolate candy cane wreath that shows so beautifully. And I'm going to show you how I package them all up and how I get them all ready to gift in such a beautiful way. But there's so many different ways to gift sourdough. These are just ones that I come back to time and time again every single year. So let's get started. So one of my favorite things to gift at Christmas time is sourdough bread, but I love doing our chocolate sourdough. So I'm going to show you how I shape the chocolate sourdough, and then I'm going to teach you 2 really neat scoring designs that are really fun at Christmas time. One is like a snowflake and the other one is some Christmas trees. So we're just going to get this into the banneton basket. So I'll show you how I shape it into my round bannetons. When you're buying banneton baskets for any of my recipes, these are a 7-inch banneton. I have the liner in these ones. You can just get them right on Amazon. But 7 inches tends to be the perfect size so that you get that nice oven spring. When you pour it out of the banneton, it doesn't pool out and doesn't get flat. I find anything wider than this tends to make your loaves a little bit smaller and flatter. So this has been fermenting since yesterday, so it's really nice and puffed up here, a nice bulk fermentation, and we'll get them into the baskets. Divide it in half, and I'm not the best at eyeballing it, so I usually like to weigh each half just to make sure that they're even. And they're not. And so this is actually a denser loaf. If you've ever made the chocolate sourdough, and I will link the recipe, this is a denser loaf of bread. So it's not going to have like a big open crumb or anything like that. And it's not going to stretch as much when we are shaping it into our round bowls. So I am just going to spread this out as best I can. And we're going to fold in the edges, and we're just going to kind of pull them into the center, and it actually kind of feels a little bit like putty. Like it doesn't feel like your high hydration loaf of sourdough. And usually with sourdough I do a pre-shape. You don't really need to do that with this one. Just folding it into the center and bringing it into its round bowl is enough. I like to do a little bit of flour on the top once I've shaped it, and then we're just going to pop that into the banneton. Okay, so same thing, we're just spreading it out as much as we can and folding it into the center. It's kind of like when we're making our dinner rolls, same type of thing, how you fold those into the center. This one's cracking a little bit on the top, so we're not going to shape it too vigorously because we really want to maintain that outer tension of the loaf. Once it peels open and the insides become the outside, it tends not to keep its shape the same way. Okay, so we're just going to sprinkle some flour on the top of that. And I want to make sure that they proof for at least 6 hours. The other thing that you can do with the chocolate loaf, and I don't tend to do this with my regular loaves, but with the chocolate loaf I find sometimes it can be helpful, is cover them up and leave them on the counter for a little while. It will kind of start to rise in the banneton, and you kind of need it to rise a little bit more so that you don't have a really dense loaf. These run the risk of being gummy. So a nice long extended bulk fermentation on the counter, and then another counter proof before it goes into the fridge can be really helpful. So I'm going to cover these and probably leave them on the counter for maybe half an hour, and then we'll put them into the fridge. Both of our chocolate loaves have finished their fridge proof. So they go into the fridge. I like to do at least 6 hours, or overnight is just as easy. And you can see they've really kind of puffed up in the banneton. This recipe is really simple like that. It tends to really expand when you put it into the banneton basket, which is great, especially if you leave it on the counter for about an hour or so before you put it into the fridge. I like that because then you have a lot of loaf to work with when you're scoring your designs. And I tend to find that because it's a lower hydration, meaning that's a little bit more dense, it doesn't spread out as much when you're trying to score those designs. So I'm gonna show you my 2 favorite designs to score into your chocolate bread. And you can, or any bread really, at Christmas time. But chocolate bread is such a fun one to gift to people because it's so different and people have usually not ever had it before. And then we're just gonna brush off the excess just because we don't want that going into the oven because that can burn. Okay. So this is a really funky one. You don't use any bread lame, you're just using scissors. So I have 2 different types of scissors here. I actually prefer these ones because they're a little bit easier to maneuver. These are just cheap hair scissors that I got specifically for bread. And then these are, I think, sewing shears. I like these ones, but I find that the holes in them are a little bit big, so I prefer these ones. So we're just gonna start in the center. And we're just going to start to cut. You're gonna have to turn it a lot. Cut almost like a star. And then once you get that done, you're gonna keep going. So you're gonna kind of off-center it. And you're just gonna keep cutting. And obviously, the longer the scissors, the bigger you can make your cuts. Oops, that one was a little bit wonky. And you're gonna go as evenly as you can. So make sure you keep turning it around in a circle. And I'm gonna try to make my cuts bigger as I go. And the reason I like doing this with the chocolate loaf as opposed to like a regular loaf is I find the chocolate loaf, you'll see, like obviously it's not flattening out at all. It's really holding its shape super nicely. And I just find when this goes into the oven and bakes and it has like the dark interior and then the flour on the surface, it really looks like a snowflake. It's so pretty. Okay, that should probably do it. And then we're gonna set that one aside. I'll just show you the close-up. So then for our second loaf, flip that over. And once again, we're gonna want lots of flour. Dust that on the top. So then for this one, I just use like a bracelet string, and we're gonna go and we're gonna make some marks in the top of the loaf. So there's already an X in the loaf because there's an X in our liner for our banneton basket, so that makes it easy. And then we're just gonna crisscross the X and make another X on this side. Mine is Christmas trees. So we're just gonna start in the center and we're going to score all the Christmas trees or all the lines that we made. You're gonna wanna make sure that your bread lame is nice and sharp. So a nice sharp razor. Okay, so we're just going all the way around. So what's important about this recipe is you want to make sure that the ends of your trees are freed in the center because you want it to kind of lift up when it bakes. So what I like to do is I like to come in here. I like to just snip under just to kind of lift up those edges to ensure, it's like cheating. Did I get them all? So now we want to make our trees. So we have this all cut. Now we want to make them into trees. So we want to know that obviously they go this way. So we're just going to take our lame and we're going to make really shallow cuts on our trees. To give you another angle here. Okay, so we're just coming in really shallow. And you can go off the edges too. Just so that we give that illusion of branches. Okay, and so for the last step, we're going to use our scissors and we're going to really accentuate those kind of like evergreen branches. So we're just going to come in and trim the sides so that they look like trees. And some people even take like, I don't like to use food dyes, but some people even take like a food coloring and make little dots all around like ornaments on the trees. So, I mean, I'll leave that up to your own discretion, but that is something that works as well. If you have even like a natural dye that you could use. Okay, so we're gonna slide these into the oven. We have all of our trees and our snowflake. You can see they held their shape really nicely. That's what I love about this recipe. You can do beautiful things with this chocolate bread and it really stays in place. Quite nice. So these just came fresh out of the oven. They're still quite hot, but let's start with this one. So I cut a bit too deep right here, so it sort of expanded a little bit more than I maybe wanted it to. But how fun is that? And it's just so impressive to receive because it's a loaf of bread and you just wouldn't think that bread could look this pretty, but it totally can. And you can do this with chocolate or you can do this with regular white sourdough or whole wheat or whatever you'd like. You can do this design with. It's just such a pretty one. Okay, and then our beautiful snowflake. And this kind of expanded out on the sides here a little bit more than I like. But what happens is if you have a lot of structure built up inside of a loaf and you don't do a deep expansion score, sometimes it does find its way out in parts that you don't really want it to. But altogether, this is so pretty. And I just love how it turns out. So the trick with this one is you want to make sure that you make those rows as close together as you can because you'll see when it goes into the oven it will spread out. And I think that's where people make mistakes with this one. And then also the bottom is nice and perfectly baked, not dark or not black at all. It didn't burn because we had our silicone mat. So altogether these are nice, beautiful loaves. We are not going to cut into them obviously because we're going to move on to our next recipe that I love to gift, but then I'm going to show you, once these cool, I'm going to show you how I wrap them up to give them to people at Christmas time. The next favorite thing that I love to gift at Christmas time is my cinnamon wreath or cinnamon star. And so I'm going to actually show you two different ways to do this today because I love the cinnamon wreath and the cinnamon star, but I also have a brand new recipe for you to try out. So it's the same dough, but the inside of the dough is different. So we're going to do like a chocolate mint candy cane wreath. And you can do this into rolls, you can do it into the star, you can do it whatever you want. But I'm going to show you how to mix up the chocolate inside, and we're going to crush some candy canes up. And it presents so beautifully in the wreath. And you can do we're going to do like a glaze on top, like a mint glaze with some candy canes, and package it all up really nice and pretty. So I'm going to show you that one in the cinnamon star because those two are my favorite. If you're bringing bread to someone, I love doing those designs, but if you're bringing like something sweet for someone, these present so beautifully when you show up to somebody's house because they are just like, it's like a work of art when they open up the little box that we're keeping them in. So right now I'm going to show you the chocolate candy cane wreath. So we've had our cinnamon dough fermenting overnight or rising overnight. This one, it says you only need a few hours, but you can easily leave that on the counter overnight. And then we're just gonna mix up our chocolate. So we have our butter in here. We're gonna go ahead and add our Dutch processed cocoa powder. Oops, a little bit too much. 3/4 of a cup of our brown sugar. And then we're just gonna do a little pinch of salt, so about half a teaspoon, 1/4 to half a teaspoon of salt. Blend it all together so it's nice and smooth, just like you would with your regular cinnamon roll filling. We have our chocolate, and then we're also gonna do some chopped up milk chocolate pieces. You can also do shaved dark chocolate. And then we have our candy canes. So let's get this dough rolled out. And so you can make this kind of as thick or as thin as you'd like. The thinner, obviously, you're gonna have more rolls, and the thicker, your rolls are gonna be a lot larger. Another thing I like to do is, if you have a bench knife, is to go around the edges and you can kind of square it off just to make it a little more even. So let's just we'll start spreading evenly the chocolate filling. And another thing that you want to be really mindful of is making sure that your butter is nice and soft, or else it's going to be difficult to spread. If you're finding it is difficult to spread, you can put your dough in the fridge for a little bit. So mine is a little bit difficult to spread, and it would have probably benefited from going into the fridge for a little bit. The colder the dough, it'll still roll out fine, but it'll kind of sustain being pulled around a lot better than if it's really warm dough. And usually if you're leaving this on the counter all night to rise, you're probably gonna need to stick it in the fridge for a minute before you try to do this, just because it will probably be pretty warm. Oh, we have this all sorted. We're just gonna take some of our chocolate and sprinkle that on the inside. And then some candy cane. And we're gonna save the candy cane. I did 4 candy canes, and I'm gonna try to save some for the top because we want to have kind of like a nice presentation on the top of the rolls, or on the top of our wreath. You can certainly make these into rolls, but that's not what we're doing today. Okay, so we're gonna roll this kind of lengthways, because if you're making it into a wreath, if I was making this into rolls, I'd probably roll it this way because my rolls would be larger. But where we're making it into a wreath, I'm gonna roll it lengthways. And I'm actually going to kind of bring this in a bit so that it gives me a larger roll. That's why you wanna kind of make sure these edges are nice and even when you roll it. So we want to make sure that we have parchment paper on our cast iron. That's really important because otherwise it does really stick, and it's tricky to get it out all in one piece if we don't do that. With the chocolate, I like to just separate it down the middle. Again, if you're finding that your dough is kind of hard to work with, you can pop this into the fridge, and when it's colder, it's really quite easy to work with. Okay, so with the candy cane and the chocolate, it's gonna be tricky to keep those edges together, but we're gonna just try to flip it over like this. Okay. And then flip it over again. So we want those edges to stay up, so just make sure that as you're kind of folding it over, you're holding those edges up. And if you did it without putting the chocolate chips or the chocolate chunks inside, this part of it would be a lot easier. But then where's the fun in that? We're trying to kind of find the center so that we can cut right down the middle. Perfect. And then open it like that. And then we're going to pull it together into a wreath. So the bottom part I know kind of looks a little bit messy when you're doing it like this. But I promise once it bakes, it kind of comes together quite nicely. So then we're going to go ahead and try to lift this up onto our cast iron. And we're going to pop that into the oven to bake. So while that's baking, I'm going to show you how to wrap your sourdough. So it's actually a lot harder to wrap around sourdough. It works a lot better to do an oval, but we have round ones today, so that's what we're gonna do. The trick is making sure your parchment paper is large enough. So I've used brown parchment paper. I don't find it's big enough this way in order to properly wrap your loaves. So I just use the Kirkland parchment paper because it's so much wider, and I find it just works a lot better. So we're gonna bring them together at the top. And again, it's going to be more of a messier wrap than if I was doing a sandwich loaf or an oval loaf. But we're just going to fold it down. Okay, and we're just going to tuck one edge in. And then tuck the other edge. And this is where it gets a little bit messier with this shape. So you're just going to take them and curl them in just like you would a present if you're wrapping a present, and then fold and tuck under the edges, just like that. Oops, we'll do the same thing for this side. So you could just gift it just like that, or I like to just take like a piece of jute, or you can do a beautiful giant bow if you want. I like to keep it really natural. So I like to just take like butcher twine or jute. And if you have a nice little greeting card, you can put it on the top. And that's how I would gift, and we wrap this one the exact same way. That's how I would gift it. You can put like a little tag on it, or just write Merry Christmas on the parchment paper, and it's just so simple and easy to show up and give someone a beautiful loaf of bread. Keep in mind that they can't like put this underneath the tree or anything like that. Parchment paper will not keep this from going stale. So if you're gifting it to someone, you're going to want them to open it right away. But that's just kind of a disclaimer for using parchment. The other thing you could do is you could slide it inside of a bread bag, and that would keep it from going stale. So if they aren't opening it right that minute, it might be helpful to kind of maybe even wrap like a bag around it if you can. That is just about finished baking. So we're just gonna mix up a glaze. I like to just start with a couple cups of powdered sugar, and then you're just gonna add milk in until it's your desired consistency. And so I like a nice pourable glaze for this recipe, just because we want the presentation of the wreath to kind of steal the show instead of like a big thick frosting on the top. And once we have this stirred up, we're just gonna add a tiny little bit of mint extract in with it. So I have this to the desired consistency that I want. It's nice and smooth, and it will go on like a glaze. So we're just gonna put like 1/8 of a teaspoon. Actually, I think there's even a little bit left in that, of like a couple drops of our mint extract, not a lot. We don't need a lot of this because it's quite strong. This is what it looks like just coming right out of the oven. So you can see the chocolate through it and the candy canes. You can put more candy canes. I just only had 4 and I want to make sure that we get some on the top of it. But this easily could have quite a bit more in there. So this is still warm, but we're gonna drizzle some glaze over it. I try to go in the same direction as the wreath if I can, but I mean, I'm not always the best at drizzling. And then we're just gonna take some candy cane and sprinkle those on top. It's kind of like a candy cane dust. I really smushed up some of them quite a lot. And it's gonna give this really nice minty flavor. And then some big ones. Okay, and then that's it. And once that's fully cooled, I'm gonna show you how we're gonna package that up. So I get these little boxes, I think they're like cake boxes or something, or like cookie boxes, but they're like a 10 by 10. I just get them on Amazon, and they are really the perfect way to gift sourdough things or goodies at Christmas. So I just lift this right up, and it fits perfectly right in the box. And what I like to do is you can cover this up and then close the box if you'd like. But what I like to do, sorry for the noise, but I like to pull these edges down so that when you close the box up, you can see through it and you can see this beautiful masterpiece that you're gifting. And I just think that that's so fun. So last, but certainly not least, this is my most gifted and most requested recipe all through the holidays, and that is the cinnamon star. Or you can make it into cinnamon rolls or a cinnamon wreath or whatever you want, but this is my most requested recipe that I have. And it is the exact same cinnamon dough that we did before. It's just resting in the fridge right now while we mix up the filling. So this is just our butter. We have 2 different types of sugar, so our brown sugar and our cane sugar, and then we're just gonna sprinkle in some cinnamon on top of that. And that's it. We're gonna blend this up into our filling. So one thing that you wanna be mindful of with this recipe, if you're making the cinnamon star, and I'm gonna show you why, because we are gonna layer the dough, you wanna make sure this is really nice and malleable. So you can even melt the butter or soften the butter a little bit if you need to, so that it spreads on your dough a little bit easier, and especially if the dough is a little bit cold, it helps to put it in the fridge. So we have it in the fridge, we're chilling the dough, and then I'm gonna show you exactly how you're gonna put together your cinnamon star. For this one, we're actually cutting the dough into 4 as equal parts as you can. And then we're just gonna kind of round them up into little balls, because we're gonna roll them back out. And then you can even use a scale to weigh them. So this one's a little bit bigger, so you can weigh them just to make sure that when you roll them out, they're gonna be sort of similar. And you don't want them to be any larger than your cast iron that you're putting them into. So that's just something to consider. We're probably not even gonna make them quite that big. Okay, so that's probably good. Just as much as a circle as you can get it, and as close to each other as possible. So now it's time to put the filling on. I actually decided to melt this down a little bit more on the stove because it was a little bit difficult to spread, and you really want to make sure with this recipe that you can spread them well, because these layers are going to stack on each other and you don't want them ripping. So you want to make sure that you bring that right out to the edges. We're going to just take our second layer and just slide it right on top. And again, you can come around and just kind of tidy it up a bit. And then we're just going to spread another layer on. Okay, and then we're going in for our third layer. So then we put our top layer on and even all the edges up. Just like a mason jar top works fine for this part. And we're going to cut quarters, and we're going to cut those in half. And then we're going to cut those in half. So now you're just going around and you're twisting 1, 2, and I like to go 3, and then pinching the edges together. Oops. You can take that off now. So 1, 2, and it kind of looks like you could probably get away with it, but I like to go around a third time because that exposes more of the cinnamon swirl. But it's totally up to you. 1, 2, 3. There you go. I think the biggest thing to remember is the more you can twist them, the better it will look. And I know that it like kind of feels like a lot when you're twisting it, but then you'll get like this like beautiful little, this one doesn't have it as much and neither does that one, but kind of like you get like this really pretty opening right here. So you just get more of the cinnamon swirl. So that's just something to keep in mind. And I actually don't have any eggs inside right now. So you would normally brush this with an egg wash, but I'm just gonna use a heavy cream because my eggs are all outside. With cinnamon rolls, pouring cream or milk over them before you pop them into the oven is like a really great practice and makes for a really nice, beautiful, gooey, soft cinnamon rolls. So cream works just as well for this too. Okay, so now we're just gonna slide this into our Dutch oven and we're gonna pop it right in the oven. So this is out of the oven and cooled. And isn't it, it's just so beautiful. This is one of my favorite things to make at Christmas time. So there's a couple different things that you can do with this. I personally prefer to see the whole star. I just feel like it's such a showstopper. So I don't like to do a glaze on it, although you certainly can. I like to just take some powdered sugar and coat the top of it, kind of like snow. And then it really just like gives that appearance of a snowflake. Okay, so then that's your snowflake. So it fits right in our box here, and then same thing, we want to curl those edges down. So what I like to do is make these right before, like put them in the oven right before I'm ready to take them to gift, and they just make such a pretty presentation with the clear front. And then again, you can get these are 10 by 10 just on Amazon, and you can do cinnamon rolls. I've done like big cinnamon rolls in them as well, either one. So that's our final one. I will also link last year's gifting because there's some other fun ones some other fun designs that I did with the cinnamon loaf. But I think that this is my favorite one to gift at Christmas. So I hope everybody has a wonderful holiday season, and make sure that you subscribe to our channel for more.